Down also come our inside singing statues, Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus, Mr. and Mrs. Snowman, and various singing elves and dancing animals. Our grandkids like to run around inside the house and get all of those mechanical statues singing and dancing at the same time. And then there's a tree decorated just so with lights, and all those wonderful tree decorations from my family and Gail's family. What a wonderful, glorious splash and clash of sound and color our house is when the family comes over for Christmas. Not so much time, space, or solitude, though, to think of the coming of Jesus. The third category is family time. For me, this is the most bittersweet portion of our journey to Christmas Day. I remember those large German family gatherings of my family and the large Polish, Croatian ones of Gail's family. You see, Gail's father was a builder, and he built a large home for his family, complete with a very large, fully finished basement. There was a fireplace in this corner and a fully stocked wet bar in that corner, complete with bar stools. Up went all the folding tables and the chairs that had been stored away since last Christmas. The women each brought their favorite ethnic dishes, and we ate until it seemed we could not move. And there at the bar, sat Gail's Uncle George. I'm not sure I ever saw Uncle George leave that bar stool, but I did see him sway on it a few times. Oh, what glorious fun and love flowed through those Christmas family gatherings. But then the years went by. And one Christmas, Uncle George was not there anymore. Another few years rolled by, and various aunts, uncles, and cousins were gone. Then it seemed suddenly that my dad, then my mother, then Gail's mother, and then her dad were missing from the family gatherings at Christmas. This is, for me, the bitter part of the journey to Christmas Day. Some feel great sadness. Others feel sharp pain as the list of those missing loved ones seems to grow and grow. It's no wonder that Christmas season has its low points as well as its high points. And finally, there's Christmas church time. My home church, St. Bartholomew's, is in a rural area of Pennsylvania near Gettysburg. We knew everyone in the congregation, mostly because we were all related, German farming folks. The church sanctuary is built in the form of a cross, with ceilings that are several stories high. There are large, beautiful, colorful stained glass windows on the long sides. And there's a huge stained glass window, beautiful in the front, a rendering of Jesus Christ, the shepherd and the Savior. There's a huge organ with those beautiful pipes. It always seems to loom out over the congregation. As a child, my first memories of Christmas church time evoke the mystery of our evening Advent services. For one thing, as a child, I could never figure out why those beautiful colored windows were always so black and gloomy at night. Other memories revolve around the smell of pine Christmas trees that decorated the sanctuary and the moving Christmas music that we all sang together. Perhaps some of you found some similarities in my stories with your own journeys to Christmas Day. Each of us has had our own travels, our own memories, our own ups and downs to this very point, this very day, this Christmas Day, the day of Jesus' birth. Now let's review the journey to that first Christmas Day as told in today's Gospel. The full story begins at the beginning of the second chapter of Luke. Joseph and his fiancée Mary were expecting a child to be born at any time. They both knew this was to be a very special child. Suddenly, they and everyone else received a decree from Caesar Augustus that the whole world should be registered, each in his own hometown. Can you just imagine Joseph's concern? He had probably not fully figured out how they were going to afford this new child, and he knew that registered eventually meant taxes, an even greater financial burden. I'm sure that both he and Mary were also worried about how Mary would survive that long 80-mile journey to Bethlehem on the back of a donkey. Next slide, please. Nonetheless, they did their duty and bravely started on their long Christmas journey. Can you just imagine their additional worry and anxiety on that first Christmas Eve when they arrived in Bethlehem and they could find no inn with any room for them? They were probably relieved and grateful to find a humble, warm, dry stable with some straw and a manger. Their travels to Christmas Day probably had even more tension and anxiety than our own modern Christmas journeys. Finally, the gospel switches to the story of the angels and the shepherds, lowly shepherds in the hills doing their menial tasks of caring for their sheep. The night was probably cold, but quiet. Only the background buzz of the night insects and the occasional sounds of the sheep. I can just see them snuggled down in their blankets around their campfire, some almost asleep, some bored, when all of a sudden, the next slide please, a bright light exploded around them, and an angel appeared out of that light, talking to them about a Messiah. And then that single angel was joined by a multitude. Next slide, please. And the gospel lesson says that the shepherds were terrified. Terrified. Now there's a new Christmas emotion for you. Terrified. And then just as suddenly the angels were gone and absolute darkness returned. Next slide. Can you just imagine the shepherds standing there with their mouths open,